So great to see you. Welcome to the CDR Policy Scoop.
Hello, Eve, and thank you very much for having me this evening.
Thank you. This is, everything that everyone has been talking about for the last week, right? Like ever since you released the proposal on Friday, it's at least taken over my life. I definitely know it's taken over Eva's life. And yeah, we have some interesting questions we'd like to discuss with you today. So yeah, appreciate you taking the time. I want to start by saying that I think I can speak on behalf of most people in the CDR sector that this is incredible. For people who've been working on this for many years, it's incredible to see what efforts have gone in to create even the pathway for carbon removals in something as complex and historic as the ETS. And so, yeah, today, I guess what we want to do is dig into some of those details. Eva, do you want to take us away with the first question?
Sure. I will obviously start right away with a big question, but also from my side, a huge appreciation to this work. Such a major, it's actually a package of proposals, but we're gonna just look at one of them. So that's the ETS directive revision. And I love the creativity in it. Some things that we haven't seen before, not necessarily on removals, but really well done on getting this out. It has taken a long time, I know. So when we talk about removals in the EU ETS, then there is one big question that I see many people confused on with different interpretations. And this is, with this proposal, is the Commission committing to buy 250 million tons of permanent removals from BioCCS and DEX? Is the Commission making that commitment?
Yes, indeed. Maybe just to say, indeed, it has been a long process, and it has been also really, really interesting to go through, because looking into the removals is a new thing for the ETS. We have worked on this for a long time to get it right, and I hope we have got it right. So the 250 million is a promise that we would like to buy 250 million permanent domestically produced removals. But we do have a review clause in case it's not possible to get these removals. So we will have to look at it in 2034. That's where we have put it in, and see if it's going according to plan. And if it's not, then we will have to adjust it.
This is, maybe to pick up right there, right? When you say to adjust it, is the idea to source additional funding for it? And actually, I want to go down that route a little bit, because I saw that there might be the potential of carbon contracts for difference, potentially also for the removals piece, but that is still an open question. Or is the idea to adjust potentially down the amount of removals that would be bought by this, by the European Commission?
The idea is mainly to adjust the funding in case there's not enough funding. So we have set aside additional funding. First of all, by auctioning the allowances equivalent to the amount of removals, we will have that funding coming in. But we know that the removals are going to cost more, particularly in the first part of the decade, maybe in the second part in particular. BioCCS will be able to be sold at the carbon price, but certainly not the DAX. So we have put aside this top up, as we call it, and if it's not enough, then we can review it, and then we could potentially take more funding to reach our target.
Okay. That's super helpful to have cleared up. I think it helps many people. Now, there is oftentimes this link made between hard-to-abate emissions or hard-to-abate sectors and removals, and the proposal makes that link as well in some of the reasoning, where basically the hardest-to-abate sectors benefit from this additional emission space, which in practice is, better liquidity and lower EUA price, of course, that the integration of removals brings. But in practice, today, looking at what the proposal puts forward, we don't really see a clear link between hard-to-abate sectors and removals, because everyone will have benefit from this additional emission space. So is there a plan to create a more specific link there going forwards?
No, I mean, it's very hard to say exactly what are hard-to-abate emissions and to define that. So we have not tried to define that in the impact assessment, but we have said that there will be this additional space for the ETS sectors to emit from the removals that is created. So we have not tried to define that, and we will not do that. So it is indeed for everyone to use. But in the ETS, it's also the thing that every installation has, you can decide, do you want to, it depends on what are your abatement costs. So it will be those sectors that have the hardest to abate or the highest abatement costs that will prefer to buy allowances. Whereas if you have the possibility to decarbonize, you should of course do that rather than continue to pay in the system. So in that way, we are also thinking that that's what the carbon market is. It is leaving the allowances for those who really need it and who are willing to pay for it.
One thing that strikes me is that there's this real emphasis in this proposal that Europe needs a scaled carbon removals market to achieve its own objectives, right? And it was actually really nice, some of the narrative around it that I saw in the proposal. Now, it's always this chicken and egg problem that many people in the industry will talk about, right? Like, we will need these pretty big volumes, but to have these big volumes, we need the investments early. One thing that is not really in this proposal is what happens before 2031. And there's the ETS investment booster, right? And then after 2031, there's the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, both of which, I mentioned it briefly earlier, seem to allude that at least ETS facilities that have biogenic emissions could potentially use funding from there for removals. But is there any more thinking around how we can actually help scale the industry to make sure it's there when we need it?
Yeah, so there are exactly those two elements. That's the funding for carbon capture, which you can both do in the booster, in the IDB and the Innovation Fund, and it's been for a while. And the other thing is that we will bring the strong signal, which you say the chicken and egg, but we have now brought the signal that we are willing to buy removals in the EU ETS. And we are willing to support removals also that are more expensive than the carbon price. And this should hopefully give a strong signal to the removals developers. Both that the ETS gives the signal and also give the financial support to the investment within the system is hopefully helpful to scale up.
Maybe let's dig a bit deeper in this price gap that Sebastian already asked about, and I think this is the second time you mentioned. So, I mean, it's quite clear today that, well, first of all, majority of the removals are expected to come from BioCCS, right? That's basically 90%. And the prices there today are like not even twice higher than EUA price, but more than that. So there is the gap is really big. And I'm just like wondering, what is the thinking on filling that gap, and where could be the limitations where it turns out that gap is just becoming infeasible to fill? I know that there are projections where eventually BioCCS price should achieve, the price parity with EUAs, but that's later on. And so how, can you give a bit more details? Because I think that the price gap is one of the biggest questions on everyone's minds. And the more understanding we have on the different tools you're thinking of? Because I have a hard time believing that suddenly, instead of having 250 million allowances, we'll have 500 million allowances available. Or maybe it will be as a result of the review clause, but that's quite optimistic. So like what else are you thinking about? Maybe also in the context of that future review.
Yeah, so the facility is expected to start buying, but of course not buy a lot in the beginning where it's very expensive, and there probably isn't much to buy either, but it will be for similar to carbon contracts for difference, where there will be a bidding for what price can you deliver, and that's what the subsidy will be to buying them, or the price will be to buying them. And we have, of course, done some modeling, and of course, it's only modeling. It's all about, in the end, how are the technology costs going to develop, and where is it feasible. So there will be a need for a lot of support, is our expectations, particularly in the beginning, and then it should go down. We have also seen, for example, the waste sector, by including the waste sector in the EU ETS, that they have a particularly good business case for doing BioCCS. But of course, it requires first that there is a carbon capture, and then they have very good streams of biogenic CO2 to do the BioCCS. So we are expecting that over time that they will not need the subsidy anymore when we come to the second part of the decade. Nobody can say exactly when, but somehow after 35, and then the subsidy period would basically be over. Then we can buy the we can buy the removals at more or less the same price as the carbon price that we're selling the allowances for. But this is all how the market is. I mean, it's hard to predict. So we need to start, and then hopefully it's going as we are seeing, as we are projecting, and then we will have to look at the review if we need a lot more money or whether we will need to adjust our ambition.
Because I have to say, when I saw some of those cost projections, that was one of the things that really stood out to me, because they seemed a bit optimistic. And one of my questions really was, those costs, I mean, they are possible, but what we see is they're possible when there's national subsidies layered on top. Like there's a lot of Nordic countries, for example, that are subsidizing BioCCS, right? And as a result, the end cost, for example, currently to corporate buyers, could be in the range that you're looking at there. So I was almost wondering if there was an implicit assumption that some of these BioCCS costs would have a national member state subsidy layered on top. And I just wanted to clarify if this was potentially the case, or if that's not in your projections.
Yeah, that's not in the projections, of course. We are trying to take the technology costs, the cost for the implementation in the modeling, and not that you need to have a national subsidy as well. Yeah, but I am not an expert on the details on how the modeling has been done. But yeah, we have certainly not taken extra subsidies into account.
So one part of the equation is the price. Another part of the equation is the actual project pipeline. And here, to me, when I look at what the impact assessment puts forward, because obviously these details are not in the proposal itself, but it looks like the 250 million tons for these years is going to be quite a stretch goal to achieve, because we're seeing that the realistic EU supply by 2030 would be around 4 million tons per year, and then rising to, let's say, 15 to 25 around 2035. So getting to 250, even if the prices would come down, would also need to have the project pipeline that actually allows to buy these allowances. So what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, now when you're mentioning these numbers, they are not so far from what we have. I think we have an end of 48 million in 2040, and that fits well what you were saying for 2035. So it's just that we are really at the beginning of this, but we believe that there's a possibility to scale up over the next 14, 15 years to around this size.
And what project developers have been telling me over the last week is there's been some concerns around this paid on delivery, right? But not, it makes perfect sense. I get why it's paid on delivery, but they still need certainty many years before to be able to raise the funding, reach final investment decision, and build these facilities that ever just stressed need to be built, right? So, and I saw that you're thinking about potentially kind of offtakes, potentially even a prepayment, but I was wondering if you can elaborate about um, how can you give kind of that certainty up front to project developers, even when the actual delivery happens potentially 3, 4, 5 years later?
Yeah, these are the details that we need to set out now. But there we are also looking at some of the other funds that we have. So the Innovation Fund and Modernization Fund, at which stage and how early can you start delivering maybe part of the financing and then rest of the financing later. So it's a very important point that we will need to focus on getting right. And we haven't got all the details yet.
Yeah, that's also something that caught my eye, that the proposal was hinting on payment on delivery, and we know that today the market doesn't really work like that, especially for BioCCS. At the same time, the impact assessment is really rating offtakes and prepayment highly. So it's encouraging to hear that the thinking potentially, by the time we get to figuring out the details, that there's going to be more flexibility than just payment on delivery, which would be, potentially, if it would just be payment and delivery, I can imagine that many project developers would rather look at the VCM today instead of even waiting for this, because it's it's just too long process to engage in, and it's too capital intensive as well, right?
Yeah, indeed. No, this is an important point to look at. I mean, the first step is to get it into the ETS directive and get the funding. And then the second step is to look at the details on how it's going to work in practice. But this we will start looking at now also.
One thing, obviously, we already said, right? But there is a pretty heavy reliance on BioCCS in this proposal, to put it mildly, right? Like we're saying, there are numbers, but let's put it at 90%. It could be higher even if DAX doesn't come through enough in the 2030s, right? And at the same time, the proposal opens up with its aspiration for tech neutrality, right? And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about this potential risk of being over reliant on a single technology. And I know that you've opened the door to other avenues also in the proposal, but I wanted to, see how you're thinking about what if BioCCS doesn't work out as well as we thought, right? Do we need more options? And how do you envision those options coming into the picture?
Yeah, so for the moment, we don't envisage any other options. But what we have said is we are looking at domestically produced removals, and they have to be permanent removals. And at the moment, it's BioCCS and it's DAX. And we are very much looking at the CRCF, the Carbon Removal Certification Framework, to define, what are permanent removals. And then when we see there are new technologies that are being certified there, or technologies that you see can be considered permanent under certain conditions, then it's possible to see whether we would take that into account. But at the moment, we only have these two technologies, or this technology that we believe is sufficiently permanent to counterbalance emissions from the ETS sectors.
So I want to look at things from the perspective of an EU ETS entity that could potentially generate also CRCF certified removals, right? could be in the future, for example, different waste incinerations, because in that space, we have some examples in Europe already. Can also be removal projects. So basically, it seems like they have three options if what is in the proposal ends up being adopted. They can either sell their credits into the VCM and not be linked in any way to the ETS. They can use them against their ETS compliance, because there's that provision, right, that will also kick in. Not sure if the timeline for that is clear yet from when, but at least finally it is possible in the ETS context. And then there is this Commission's, this Central Purchasing Program, right, that we have been talking about here for quite some time. And it seems to me that as the years go by from now onwards, what makes most sense will potentially keep changing for an operator. So how do you think about this sequence and this impact, and what pathways these project developers in practice will be taking?
Yeah. So we hope that we offer a good offer with the facility that would buy the removals in Europe and buy them at the relevant price. But we have made it possible for operators to do two things. Indeed, also to use them for their own compliance immediately from 2031. Maybe the price is lower, but maybe there are other advantages that they think by using them themselves rather than going through selling them to a facility. So we want to have this, which is the easiest options in a way that you can use them for your own compliance. And then there is, of course, for the operator, whether to sell to the facility, the European facility, or to the VCM. And there we will have to see how we can compete with the VCM. At the same time, we are spending taxpayers' money, so there are limits to what we can offer. We can offer the price that is reasonable. So yeah, we hope this is attractive.
If I can build on that, again, thinking about these different avenues for removals, I keep coming back to the question of timing, right? Just because the timing is such an important factor in building up the supply. So the avenue that you two just spoke about, in theory, would be opening up in 2031, correct? Like this is something that could happen immediately in 2031, and I didn't see any volume limitations, just that they would be deducted from the 250 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We aim to start immediately in 31. Yeah.
So then that's interesting, because I guess that's a benefit of this one, is that potentially it would be available pretty quickly. And then on the other hand, kind of the facility that purchases the removals, on timing there, because I guess you have to, do you first have to auction and then maybe the first offtakes would start happening, or is this something that potentially could already or be happening before 2031 for delivery in 2031?
No, you cannot. So compliance, there it will be possible to use your compliance in 31. For the auctioning, we aim to start auctioning the allowances for the removals in 31. And as soon as we have started that, we can also have the commitments. But we cannot start before 31.
What I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, super helpful.
So Sebastian, I have two a bit broader questions. If you have some specific ones you want to get into before we wind up, feel free to bring those
mine are
up.
also a bit broader that I
Okay.
would like to go to, so go for it.
So one question that came to my mind when I was reading the proposal is how differently we see the integration of removals and international credits. And because one is obviously removals are incorporated above the cap, credits under the cap, and there are also different rules for this reversion clause in the case of international credits. If we won't have enough, it will impact the linear reduction factor. but there is no clear contingency in case, for example, allowances have been auctioned, but then the removals actually are not successfully delivered for that funding. We only have one fallback, that is for allowances that have not been yet auctioned. So can you maybe elaborate about this thinking behind that design, like how these decisions were made and why they were made specifically?
So you mean the difference between how we're doing for the removals and for the international credits?
Yeah, exactly. And why you decided to treat them differently? Because we could also imagine that international credits might feature some removals, right?
Yeah. So I think for the removals, we are quite certain that we really want to support scaling up the removals production in Europe, and also because we know that we need the removals post 2040 and post 2050. So this is something we really need in Europe. So there's a strong objective to help getting this integrated into the EU ETS. So we have said we want to start buying, and we have set aside some funding for it, and we can revise that if needed. For the international credits, I think it's different, and this is why the regime is also different. First of all, the climate law is different. We may use up to 5% international credits to reach our target. And then we have said, okay, the fair share of that, so the share that the ETS sectors have of the economy, we could potentially use to allow for more emissions in the ETS, and only have an 85% target in 2040. But there's so much more uncertainty about the international credits. And we are also going to come with a proposal in November on specifically on how that could be done. It came rather late in the process, so we haven't had the possibility to look into it to the same extent. So therefore, we have put the full safeguard in the proposal, saying that we will look in 2033. Is there a possibility? Does it look as if we are scaling up international credits of the right quality and everything? And then we will take a decision, yes or no, because we are anyway only going to use that from 36. And it's the same a bit like with the domestic removals. You need some funding to tell the project developments that this is going to come and we are going to buy it. So we are setting the funding aside and we will start buying, but then we will have a cutoff date where we will say, or an assessment date where we will say, this seems as if it works or not. And then it's also about ensuring that we keep the environmental integrity of our climate law, our climate ambition in 2040, of the ETS ambition, that we don't promise anything on the international credits that we are not 100% sure that we can deliver. So there is a difference of the objective of the two things.
I had a question that I think you partially answered, but I want to just quickly get a confirmation. My understanding was from the proposal that there would be this assessment in 2033, and purchases or commitments to purchase international credits would only happen after that assessment. But the way you just framed it was, we will already start, we will then have a review in 2033 to assess how it's going. So the potential purchases or commitment to purchase could happen before 2033 for international credits.
Yeah, that's right. The funding is set aside already now, and we can start, making commitments towards projects from 31. And then we see, and if there isn't enough, then we can stop it. When we have the review, it's a yes, no, we can stop it. Or if we say the trajectory is looking good, the projects are coming on, it seems to be going well, then we continue, and we will be able to buy those 260 million tons.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mette. It has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for taking the time from your very busy agenda. We are, delighted that you were able to join us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It's a very interesting journey, and we are very happy that we have reached this milestone now, and the proposal is out. And now we look very much forward to discussing it in the council and the parliament, and see how that goes. So thank you also for having this discussion tonight. It also opens some other issues for me.
Wonderful.
Great, and
Good luck with the negotiations, and yeah,
Yes.
we'll have you on in the future to talk about progress. Thank you,
Thanks
Mette.
so much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Bye.